So how do you become the person who uses the 24 hours they have in a day effectively, so that you're not that busy person who's moving around in a bunch of directions but not really making progress on anything? Well, that's what we're going to look at in this video. I'm going to share with you some practical time management strategies that I use myself, that I use with clients, and they're going to help you reclaim your time, your energy, and your attention so that you can put it towards what really matters to you. Do less in order to do more. It's not just that we lack time, we also lack attention. We are pulled in multiple directions at once, and we take on more projects and tasks and responsibilities than we really should. As a result, we feel overwhelmed. We feel busy. We feel like we're that hamster on the wheel, spinning but not getting anywhere. Sometimes this is unavoidable. Life places demands on us. We have responsibilities we cannot avoid, nor do we want to avoid them. Sometimes we need to work on multiple projects, but often we make it harder on ourselves unnecessarily. We think that if we work on multiple goals and projects at once, that we will be more effective, or we're scared of just focusing on one thing, and so we hedge our bets with multiple different opportunities. The problem with this is that it's a very ineffective way to approach your work and to approach your life. Instead, as much as you can, you want to be what Greg McKeown calls an essentialist. In his book titled Essentialism, he compares the non-essentialist to the essentialist. The non-essentialist thinks that they have to be all things to all people. They say things like, I have to, it's all important, how can I fit it all in? Whereas the essentialist tries to be less but better. They think, I choose to. Only a few things really matter. What are the trade-offs? In the context of doing things, the non-essentialist follows the path of more. He calls it the undisciplined pursuit of more. The non-essentialist reacts to what's most pressing. They say yes to people without thinking. They try to force execution at the last moment, whereas the essentialist embraces the disciplined pursuit of less. They pause to discern what really matters. They say no to everything except the essential, and they remove obstacles to make execution easy. And what does this result in? Well, for the non-essentialist, it means that they live a life that does not satisfy. Ultimately, they take on too much and their work suffers. They feel out of control. They feel overwhelmed and exhausted. And the essentialist lives a life that really matters. They choose what they work on carefully so that they can do great work. They feel in control at least more of the time. They get the right things done and they experience joy in the journey. The fact of the matter is, you can almost always get further ahead by doubling down on one project or one goal, as scary as it might seem. When you try to work on multiple projects, not out of necessity, but because you think you should, you diffuse your focus, you feel busier, and you end up getting mediocre results. But when you concentrate your energy, attention, and time on less but better, you actually end up getting more. You get better and more results. There's another benefit to this from doing less but better, which is that your subconscious goes to work on it. You'll be coming up with new ideas, new approaches, new strategies to what it is that you're trying to do, and you'll be solving problems even when you're not working. This is less likely to happen with multiple projects because they're all competing for your unconscious, right? They're all competing for that attention. Paul Graham calls this the top idea in your mind, and it's the argument for working on one thing at a time. He says, you should be careful what you let become critical to you. Try to get yourself into situations where the most urgent problems are the ones you want to think about. If you have multiple unnecessary things critical to you, then it's going to be split. You're not going to be giving your unconscious the space and time to work on what's most important. Fundamentally, the problem with traditional time management is that it implicitly implies that you can get everything done, but you can't. Effective time management starts by deciding what not to do. That's no easy thing. It involves sacrificing the good projects, the good goals for the great ones. Oliver Burkeman writes in his book, 4,000 Weeks, it's better to begin from the assumption that tough choices are inevitable and to focus on making them consciously and well. And so before we dive into the more surface level time management strategies, you need to understand that none of those are going to change the game for you unless you minimize and direct your focus towards less but better. Now, a quick side note on this topic that has helped me a lot is something called strategic laziness. You cannot optimize everything. Some of the most effective people I know are completely unorganized in some areas of their life, right? But they're okay with that because it's actually what enables them to be effective in the areas where it counts. For example, I'm terrible at email. I let it build up over days, sometimes weeks, and then I handle it all. Usually I delete a lot of them, but I'll respond to the important ones. And this might not be like productivity guru approved behavior, but it gives me the mental space to focus on what's really important to me. And yes, I could get better at email. I could try and like optimize all that, but I'm just strategically lazy about it. It's not that important to me. And by ignoring it, at least a little bit, I'm much more effective at the work that matters. In other words, it's okay to let some things just slip by. It's okay to not like perfectly maintain some systems in your life if you're trying to push forward big projects and do great work. In a way, you kind of have to let some things fall by the wayside. Okay, energy management over time management. I actually hesitated to make this video for this exact reason. Time management is secondary to energy management. Even if you perfectly optimize your schedule and you manage your time well, it doesn't mean that you will feel energized or bring the necessary amount of energy to the work that you've scheduled. You can plan to work on your side hustle after your day job. You can put it in your calendar, but if you're exhausted, then what are the chances of you actually doing that work and doing it well? Pretty slim, right? So it's not just that you have something in your calendar. You actually need to be the person who does it. You need to have the energy to do it. As the great performance coach Jim Lear says, energy, not time, is the fundamental currency of high performance. And there are 4 principles from Lear's book, The Power of Full Engagement, which I want to share with you because they're useful to internalize. First, full engagement requires drawing on 4 separate but related sources of energy: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. It's not just about physical energy. You need the others too, because if you're high in physical energy but low in emotional energy, then you're not fully engaged. You might not approach the task in the same way, the activity, whatever it is that you're trying to do. You need to manage and maintain all 4 of these energy sources. The second principle: because energy capacity diminishes both with overuse and underuse, we must balance energy expenditure with intermittent energy renewal. This is why working in sprints is very useful, especially if you're a knowledge worker. It almost always outperforms that constant, like steady stream of work. Because when you work that way, just in that constant stream, that constant steady state, there's little intensity and there's little rest. It's much better to push forward like really hard and then pull back. Lear writes in the book, we must learn to live our own lives as a series of sprints, fully engaging for periods of time and then fully disengaging and seeking renewal before jumping back into the fray to face whatever challenges confront us. Third principle, to build capacity, we must push beyond our limits, training in the same systematic way that elite athletes do. I've talked many times before on this channel about building work capacity or building your capacity and your ability to focus. You should train this like a muscle, and the way you do that is by imposing some discomfort and stress upon yourself in a healthy way. You focus a little harder, a little longer each day or each work session. You push the boundary and you increase your energy capacity over time. The fourth principle, positive energy rituals, highly specific routines for managing energy, are the key to full engagement and sustained performance. Essentially, these are habits. They're the things that you do on a regular basis to maintain high energy levels. And so you have to ask yourself, what are those for you at the moment? And perhaps what rituals and habits could you implement to increase energy capacity? The last thing I'll say on the energy management thing is that you need to remember that the unoptimized, high energy, high intensity person will outperform the low energy, optimized person every time. So if you take someone who doesn't use any of the tactics I'm about to share with you with time management, but they're just high energy, they're going to do way better than the guy who's like got the fancy calendar apps and task management and all that kind of stuff, but they just lack energy and they lack drive and intensity. Okay, so now that we've formed this foundation, let's talk about some actual tactical time management tips. Let's talk about how to dial in your routine. Now, there's no one size fits all routine, as you know. I like to wake up early, like 5 a.m. and get to work pretty soon after that. A good friend of mine wakes up many hours after that. He likes to chill out for a bit and then get to work. But we're both effective people, right? We both get a lot of stuff done. Fundamentally, you must figure out what works for you in terms of routine, not just listen to other people who tell you things like you need to wake up early and work. You should experiment with these things and see if they work for you. But there are some useful principles and tactics to adopt regardless of your personal preferences. The first one is the maker-manager schedule. This is from Paul Graham, and it's extremely helpful if you're someone who's, say, a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, or you're a knowledge worker, and you have to do like a mix of creative work and administrative work or management work, right? Like meetings, calls, sorting things out. Managers tend to work in like 30 to 60 minute chunks. Their day, there's a bunch of different types of work. They take meetings 1 hour, they might be organizing something else the next, and their day is quite dynamic. Makers, such as writers, programmers, they, quoting Paul Graham, prefer to use time in units of half a day at least. You can't write or program well in units of an hour. That's barely enough time to get started. Now, especially if you're doing your own thing, you need to be both the maker and the manager. But if you try to be both at the same time, you will lose a lot of effectiveness in time. For example, I'm at least twice as productive on mornings where I do not have a call scheduled. Even if it's like a 15-minute call in the middle of the morning, it just interrupts my mental flow, like my creative flow. And so it's not that I'm losing 15 minutes, I might be losing like an hour worth of potential focused time. And so as much as you can, you want to split your day in half. You might not be able to do this perfectly because, sometimes you need to take calls and do manager stuff, even when you don't want to. But as much as you can, it's useful. And so for me, I like to have my maker schedule from like 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. That's like sacred time for the most part. Sometimes I'll have a call that needs to be scheduled there. But as much as I can, that time is blocked off for maker work. And then after that, I'll do the more managerial stuff, meetings, calls, admin, and so forth. It might look different to you. You might want to do your manager work in the morning and your creative work in the afternoon or evening. Figure out what works best for you, but I would strongly encourage you to split these two as much as you can. The next tip is one you've heard of, which is to eat the frog. And what that means is that you do your hardest, most important task first thing in the day. It's likely not routine that's your problem. Routine is simple. We know how to put things in the calendar. We know how to schedule. We know how to take breaks. This stuff is easy. What's hard is doing the work, especially the hard work. We use avoidance strategies like planning out routines and trying to find a more efficient way of doing things instead of just doing the thing. And then when we get to the end of the day, having not done the thing we know is important, we tell ourselves that it's a routine issue. Well, it's not. It's an avoidance issue, which is why if you're like most people, including myself, you must front load the hard work. Not just the hard work, but the hard, important work. The stuff that really moves the needle. The work that if it gets done, the rest of the day can completely fall apart, but you'll still be proud that you got that one thing done. For me, it's writing. It's writing video scripts, essays, books, whatever it may be. I can come up with every excuse in the book to not write in the morning, but I know that it's the hard, important work. And if I do it, I'm happy with my day. If I get 2 hours done, I'm good. The rest of the day can just fall apart and it's fine. The next part of optimizing your routine is to follow your natural inclination. And what I mean by this is whether you're fluid or structured. So some people thrive in structure. They are more effective when their calendar is like planned out down to the minute, right? This structure makes them feel calm. It makes them feel relaxed. And they almost require it to be this way. Others, like myself, operate in a more fluid way. There are important things to get done during the day, but they aren't necessarily scheduled in the calendar. Now, obviously, this largely depends on your work situation. If you're working a 9 to 5 at an office, then you have to be structured to some extent by default. If you're a solopreneur working from home, then you can sort of set your own schedule. But the point is that you shouldn't try and work against your nature. Like, I tried scheduling my calendar down to the T and it just didn't work. I'd tell myself, hey, I'll do 4 hours of deep work and then I'll go to the gym at this exact time. And what would happen is I'd get like 2 hours into the focus block, I'd crush the work, finish it early, and then my calendar would be like, well, you still got this work block and you're going to the gym at 12 p.m., but it's 10 a.m. And like, I felt like going to the gym. So I just went to the gym. So I just leaned into this and started embracing the fluid, more unscheduled life. And it works better for me. If I feel I want to work more, then I'll work more. If I feel like I need to stop working and go for a walk outside, then I'll do that. Like, I just listen to what the body says. And I kind of know if it's like lying to me. Like, you need to push through the work sometimes, right? Even if you don't feel like it. But I think there's something to be said about that. But again, try it out. If you know that having a lack of schedule on your calendar makes you less effective and you don't like it, then maybe you should schedule. And if it's the other way around, then try and just schedule less and be more fluid. One thing I will say is that it's useful to have hard boundaries. Parkinson's law states that work expands to fill the time allotted to it. And so even if you're a fluid scheduler, it pays to have hard boundaries on your work hours, because if you don't, then it's very easy for you to just like lower the intensity and lower the focus, because you can say, oh, well, it's all right. I can work tonight. Or I can work later on this evening. And that's actually, it makes you less effective. Like, constraints increase productivity. You will use your time more wisely if it's limited. You will focus with more intensity and consistency if your day ends at, say, 5 p.m. than if you just give yourself liberty to work into the night. Okay, moving on. 3 simple methods for managing your tasks and projects. For many years, I overdid task management. I used all the apps, I tried all the techniques, and for the most part, it resulted in negative productivity. I wasted so much time. Instead of working, I would be procrastinating on planning and setting up things to do the work, but never actually doing the work. It wasn't until I simplified my approach that I started being more effective. And so I want to share 3 simple methods with you. These are not unique. You've likely heard of them, but I will encourage you to adopt one if you feel like you're being too complicated with all the task management stuff. The first is the getting things done method, the famous getting things done method. So the first step is to capture anything that comes across your mind. It could be information, could be an email, could be a task that pops into your head or anything else. You put this into your inbox. Might be a folder, like a physical folder system. It might be a folder in your task management app. And then you clarify. So you decide whether the item is a project, a next action, or reference material. Then you organize. You put everything where it needs to be. So it might be in your calendar. You might delegate it to someone else. Or you might organize it in a task list, and so on. Another component is that you review. So you look over the lists. You do a small daily review and a longer weekly one. And then you engage. You do the work. You execute. There's a lot more to GTD than just this, but it's beyond the scope of the video. So I encourage you to read the book. But there is one little bonus tip from the system that I love and constantly use, which is the 2-minute rule. So if something takes less than 2 minutes, then just do it. Like, don't schedule it. Don't put it in your inbox. Don't put it in a task list. Just do it right there and right then as it comes in. For example, I used to get bills in my email and I'd see them pop up and it'd be like, you need to pay your internet bill. And I'd think, okay, I'll get to that later. And then I wouldn't get to it and I'd have to pay like a late payment fee. And then I realized, like, it takes less than 2 minutes if I get the email on the phone to just click pay now and like pay the bill. Like, it's not a time consuming task. And by doing that, by just executing on it, you close that loop. You close the open loop. So you don't have to think about it. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to realize 4 weeks later that you still haven't paid the bill. And so there's many little tasks like that you can just execute on straight away. And it will make you so much more effective in work and in life. The next one is the Eisenhower matrix, which I find very useful for prioritizing tasks when I've got a lot on my plate. The way it works is there's 4 quadrants. Of course, there's 4, that's what quad means, but you get the idea. And so you can see that we have important, urgent, important, not urgent, not important, urgent, and not important, not urgent. And with the important and urgent tasks, those are the ones you want to do. You want to execute on those. The important and not urgent, you want to schedule. The not important and urgent, you want to delegate if you can. And then the not important and not urgent, you just want to ignore them, delete them, like not do them because they're not important and they're not urgent. And the final method is the one I use personally, which is the 3 lists. I got this from Oliver Burkeman's book, 4,000 Weeks. Essentially, you have 3 lists. So open, closed, and done. The open list is a list of all your tasks, like everything you could work on, right? This should be a long list. It should look a little bit overwhelming. The closed list is what you will work on. And you need to limit this to a specific number, no more than 10. You're not allowed to add a new task from the open list and put it on the closed list until you've got space for it, until you've completed something on the closed list. This forces you into a mode of execution rather than constant planning. And when you complete a task, you can put it into the done list, which means you can see the progress you're making. It helps build momentum, and it just feels good to see those tasks ticked off. So I use a combination of the 3 lists on, say, like a weekly level for planning, and then on a daily basis, I just write down like 5 or 6 tasks in a notebook, maximum, no more than 6 tasks for the day. Quite often, it might just be like 1 or 2 big things that I need to work on that day. Like today, it's literally just make this video and then like handle some admin stuff. And that's it. Okay, let's quickly talk about calendar management techniques, for which there are 3 things. The first is to theme or batch your work on specific days. So I talked before about the maker manager schedule for your day, where you want to, do creative work in the morning perhaps, and then do your admin or manager work in the afternoon. Well, there's a weekly version that's similar to that. If you're wearing multiple hats, then it can pay to wear those hats on specific days. Say you're a solopreneur or a freelancer, then you likely have multiple areas of responsibility, different types of work. And so you need to market your product or your service, you need to deliver and fulfill it, you need to take care of administrative work, you need to take calls and meetings and so on. Instead of trying to manage these sporadically throughout the week, what you can do is theme your days. So you might decide that on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday that you just dedicate those to product or service, like doing that work. And then Thursdays is your meetings day. And then Fridays might be marketing day, and so on. And you don't need to get this perfect, but it's worth working towards. If you can batch as many meetings as possible in one day, and you know that that day every week is going to be meeting day, it can just make you far more effective on those other days. The next tactic is to take the monthly view. And so I like to dedicate and chain days together to focus on big needle movers. So I'll look at the month view of my calendar and just look, where can I put like 3 to 4 days, just block them out. Like there's nothing else going on. I can find that time and I can really sprint on a specific goal or project. Because if you can do this, if you can really make that time over a set of days, you can get like weeks worth of work done, like weeks worth of normal work, semi-distracted work done in that time frame. So during these chain days, when I look at it on a monthly level, I like to block out all meetings and again, intentionally drop the ball on some less important stuff, like using that strategic laziness I talked about at the start of the video. Right, final thing on the calendar side of things is to set shorter meeting times and longer focus times. There's 2 truths. The first is that most meetings can be half the length they usually are, and most projects and tasks that require focus usually take twice as long as you'd expect. What do we do with those facts? Well, we should schedule more time in our calendar for deep work, and we should reduce meeting times, if it's not obvious. Don't just set 1-hour calls because that's the standard thing to do. Try 30 minutes or 20 minutes. Non-orthodox times can be very useful because they are far more intentional, right? Like a 20-minute meeting, it's like, that's not a 30-minute meeting, it's 20 minutes. We better get straight to the point. The problem with like 60-minute meetings is that it's not just 60 minutes of your day. It's also the 10 to 15 minutes before that meeting or call and the 10 to 15 minutes after. So a 1 hour meeting takes up like 1.5 hours of your time and maybe even longer in terms of the lack of focus from the context switching, going in and out of different work. All right, finally, we have activity stacking. I was in two minds about including this because it's a little bit, I don't know, it might be obvious to people, they might already do it, but it's just a fancy way of saying multitasking, but it's an effective kind of multitasking. It's not bouncing between multiple cognitive tasks and splitting your focus. It's just killing two birds with one stone. My favorite ways to do this is consumption. So like listening to a podcast or audiobook while doing zone 2 cardio. I have a rule that admittedly I sometimes break where I only listen to podcasts while driving or while doing zone 2 cardio on the treadmill. So like incline walking. And in my mind, it's like I can sit on the couch and listen to a podcast and consume information, or I can like exercise at the same time and get that information and be healthy and fit. So related to that is the treadmill desk. I've got a standing desk. The one I'm sitting at right now, it goes up, and I've got a treadmill that goes underneath. And it sounds a bit stupid. I was always skeptical of using one, but I found it great. Like I put it on a slow speed. I can do admin work or stuff that doesn't require like a huge level of focus, and I can just get more steps in. And I also notice like a slight cognitive improvement when I'm walking compared to sitting. On the topic of walking, which all these activity stacking ideas are, is to do mental work while walking. So if you're a knowledge worker, if you need to think strategically about things, or you write, or you solve problems, then going for walks outside without headphones, without music, without podcasts is a very high leverage thing to do. You can think through problems that you're dealing with. You can write things out in your head, like outline them. Or you can take your phone with you like I do and record voice notes the whole time, or use an app like Super Whisper, which transcribes them to text. This is a highly effective way of working. And I find often if I'm like stuck here and I'm trying to think through something and I can't, going for a walk for like an hour or two and just thinking through it all is very useful. And it's a form of activity stacking because you're getting steps in, you're exercising, hopefully you're getting sunlight depending on where you live, and just makes life better. So that is it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Time management is an important part of the high performance picture, but it is not the only part. You also have to do the work. If you want to get better at grinding through the work, especially the boring work, then check out my in-depth video on how to grind through the boring work. It's a great sequel to this video that you've just watched, so I hope to see you there.